Hey, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Frank About Health. And I announce the return of Alison Petty, who has come back to this show after speaking with us, me and Phyllis at the time, about the power of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. That was a very successful show. And as I'd mentioned on one of my recap shows, I knew that Alison Petty was going to return because a lot of progress has occurred with her work that she does in London, as well as what she's been doing on her own social media in the whole aspect of helping everyone obtain better quality of life and when dealing with mental health challenges. And if you recall, we had an encore presentation of that show a few weeks ago where she was discussing how after dealing with crippling fibromyalgia, she was able, through rock climbing and through other challenges and through the ability to use her understanding of NLP to come into a better quality of life. But now we want to go and dig deeper into the harnessing the power of our language, which is a little bit more in depth, not just using NLP techniques, but also giving through personal experience and also through a discussion that we're going to have in the next hour, how all of us can use the power of our language for the better, whether it's professionally, personally, socially, and especially medically. So that all being said, before I officially reintroduce Alison into the show, I have to issue my disclaimer. So bear with me as I pull it up and read it in as much detail as possible. Okay, this show is for information purposes to foster an open conversation of experiences and insights regarding your health. The content does not represent the views of TalkRadio.NYC or of Frank About Health, and we are presenting insights for your consideration. The views expressed are purely those of myself and my guest today, Alison Petty, and we are not meaning to provide you the information as medical advice. Please remember that you should always consult a medical professional before making any changes to your medical care. Therefore, while being frank about health, we want you to maintain whatever treatments and quality of life management programs that are working for you. We hope to add value during the next hour. That all being said, Alison, thank you for coming back to Frank About Health.
Thank you. Sorry, I was keeping myself on mute just because I have a little bit of a cough, but hi. Thank you. It's so lovely to be back. Yeah, I've got a little husky voice at the moment, but thank you. It's really good to be back with you.
Oh, it's that same here. And considering you're 4 hours ahead of me now, it's about 8:35 or 8, no, actually it's 9 p.m., right?
No, 9 p.m. So I think last time it was 10 o'clock. So this is, I like this time of year for doing this kind of show with you. But obviously I would have been very happy to come at 10 as well. So yeah, it's really good to be back with you.
So, welcome back and tell us, what has life been like for you since you were on the show originally back in, I think, was it April?
I think, yeah, the first show we did was in April. It's been great. I've had a year of, so I'm based in North Wales. I'm from Sussex originally, down the south coast of England, but I'm based in North Wales. So we have lots of mountains, lots of rock climbing here. So I've had a brilliant summer of a lot of rock climbing, which is great because, as you know, and as anyone that knows my story, I had 24 years of being predominantly bedbound, wheelchair due to fibromyalgia and ME. But when I was 17, I wanted to be a rock climbing instructor before I got ill. So I am very much making up for lost time. I don't want to be an instructor now. I just want to climb. So I've spent this year coaching my clients. Obviously, I am a mindset coach. That's my profession, but that's also purpose for me. Yeah, so it's been a really good work-life balance. I'm very pleased to say. I've had a lot of sunshine, a lot of climbing, a lot of coaching, and yeah, it's all feeling very good.
When we first met, were you just starting your practice, or were you already working with a steady clientele of people that were also rock climbing with you? Were they sports minded, or was it a combination of various people with different circumstances?
Oh, so when we first met, no, my business was fully up and running by that point. And I mean, I don't coach climbing. As you know, I coach mindset. So it could be somebody who's a climber who's got a fear of falling or something, you know, like falling off the rock, you know, and not as in like falling, but just like falling on the rope.
Yes.
But you know, I work with people from all walks of life. So I have I've been working this whole year with a principal of a sixth form multi-academy trust college over here in Greenwich, and his life is in a very good place, but it's about helping him to excel even better in his role, because of that trickle down effect is really important for him, because as the head of the college, he can really impact, his teachers, his pupils, even the families of the pupils. So we've been working together over this year to help him with his mindset and his communication, his language, which obviously we're talking about today. But then a
Yes.
12-year-old boy who came to me through his family, obviously, who couldn't get into school because his anxiety was so severe because of something that had happened. And we had one session together, and I'm happy to say he was able to get back to school with a big smile on his face. So, for me, it's not about the identity that the person's presenting with, or their job, or their background. It's about whatever's holding them back, whatever's stopping them. And it could be a phobia, it could be as I say, something's happened and that's just completely changed your perception of the world, and you're being held back from doing things. Or it could be something like a sport where you've got some kind of like glitch about something and you're not performing to the best of your ability. So it's about helping that person do that. Yeah.
Wow. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but did Phyllis and you discuss about some upcoming certification that you were going after, or was that something you were just completed?
No, that was something I was working through at that time. So you can get all different kinds of certifications. This was a really important one for me, because this was, and actually the next 3 days I am back on the same course, but as a mentor. So last winter I was doing, it's an advanced clinical diploma in NLP coaching hypnotherapy. So it's all completed. I'm all long ticked off now and certified with that. And now I'm helping out on the course with the new cohort. But what's the thing that's really special about it for me is that there's a guy called Dr. Phil Parker, and he's the man who designed the NLP technique that originally I did in 2016. That was the thing that got me out of the wheelchair and gave me my life back. So 6 years later, I've now gone through the studying on his diplomas and clinical diploma, and just spent a year being trained by him. So that's, and he's one of the top NLP practitioners in the world. So it's been a really, really awesome journey.
Wow. No, I'm happy for you. I guess the one thing that I know when we spoke about doing this show, which was like a follow-up, is that you and I were coming up with the title together, Harnessing the Power of Our Language. And it had both a very insightful meaning to me. I was going through a lot of personal challenges that I realized in using some of the skills that you and I spoke of, I was able to overcome those challenges. So I saw it as either an expansion of NLP or a realization that you developed in your own practice from using NLP. What would you say is what brings you here today? You want to talk about what you realized from NLP, or how everyone who's listening and watching this episode can use it to get to the realization?
Yeah, when we talked about what we were talking about on this show, I think one of the first things I said was, one of the things I'm most passionate about is the power of language, and talking about that with my clients or anyone, who wants to talk about it. So for me, it's a really big subject, but it really comes down to, it's what I think should be taught in schools. And it's so shocking to me that these days, maybe some schools do teach this kind of stuff, but it's so simple, and we're not brought up to understand how impacting our language can be. So we know that when we speak to other people and they speak to us, if we're not speaking from a kind place, or we're speaking from a kind place, how impacting that can be, both negatively, positively. If we tell someone we love them, or we say something horrible, that impact. So we understand that. We know what it's like to have that done to us and to speak that to other people. We've all been there and done it, I'm sure.
Yes.
But for me, the most important side of that is the most impacting part of that is the language of our own narration, of how we're talking to ourselves, that language, that dialogue that's going round and around our head, sometimes on like a runaway train, and sometimes when we are consciously thinking something through, or deliberately thinking something through. So that for me is, NLP is all wrapped up in that. There's so much about NLP as language. It's like a huge cornerstone of NLP. But I think, just generally.
So you find that language is not just using words, and probably techniques like NLP can help create the proper structure. And I think you call it roadmap for people to use them effectively. But there's also the inner dialogue that harnesses hopefully your empathy, that you would be able to understand how the listener might feel when you present those words in whatever construct or intention you have. And then there's the other aspect that if you are dealing with an individual who may have mental health problems, sometimes you could have communicated to them the best intended comments or statements or questions, and they'll still confuse them and take them as insults or
Absolutely.
hostile. So there's a perceptual aspect of it as well, correct?
Yeah, and we don't know how what we say is going to land with somebody. You know, we can do our very best to say things in a very constructive or positive or healthy way, but you know, we don't know what the other person's going through, or um, yeah, people have all kinds of things going on with them that can make it very difficult for them to receive things in a certain way. But yeah, the roadmap, you know, that is very much, that's a key word for me, just like creating that roadmap for the brain. And you and I have talked about that in our private conversations.
Yes.
But language really does, it's a huge part to me of what makes that roadmap either a healthy one or a positive one or a negative one. So when I talk about a roadmap, excuse me, I mean literally a roadmap. So you're giving your brain a map of which direction it's going to go in, because if you don't, it's kind of like, you know, you get on a horse and you let it go its own way. You know, you let the reins go, but you sat on the horse is just going to go wherever it wants to go. You want to go up around like some field somewhere up into a forest, and the horse is off over here somewhere, but you take those reins, you do your thing. I mean, I don't horse ride, but whatever that thing is, to like get the horse to go in the right direction with those reins. And you can harness it essentially and send it off in the right direction. And very much with your brain doesn't know to come back and go, you sure you want to think like that? Are you sure you actually want to do that? Or are you sure you want to feel like that? Because you know what you're saying right now is going to have you feel like this, because I'm going to release certain chemicals because you're talking in a certain way that's going to really bring you down. It's just gonna respond to whatever you're thinking. So that's,
Interesting.
yeah, it's kind of like you have to like half the time we you know, we're mostly unconsciously thinking, and our brain, you know, we're running around shopping, we're doing our thing, we're in the car, and our brain's just ticking away. But when we are able to catch it, and you know, it does take work, it takes practice, it takes that little like bit of self-awareness to like really like connect to those moments where it's like, whoa, hang on, that's not helpful, whatever that is, and then changing that. And we can talk a bit more about that perhaps in the next segment. But yeah, that's what
Right.
that roadmap, and that is what gives us a structure so that we can move through our life heading in a direction that's going to serve us well, rather than down that slippery slope to the unhappy places, which, you know, we've all been there, we'll all go
Yes.
there again. But it's, you know, we do have choice, we do have a choice to change that language, and that will change that.
And as you are already being made aware, we're a minute till break, but when we come back, we're going to actually spend the next half hour in segments 2 and 3 actually working with ourselves together in conversation, as well as the listeners and viewers, to understand ways to change that pattern of communication if it's currently not working. And also you can give personal examples that you may have found that you could help and provide more insight to me as well as to the other people listening in. So ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned as we learn on this episode of Frank About Health how to harness the power of our language right here, both on TalkRadio.NYC and on our Facebook channel. So please stay tuned. Welcome back. And we were just talking with Alison about how a lot of our inner dialogue can determine how we communicate with our language to ourselves, to other people, to our colleagues, friends, family, so forth and so on. But that all being said, Alison, I mean, one thing that I've always heard growing up is think before you speak or think before you act. But in this particular case, since language is in itself very volatile in today's society, as you probably have seen in the media, in politics, in relationships, and in the workplace, so forth and so on. I think everyone now has to be more mindful about practically every word, every nuance, every intonation in their voice as they communicate information, ideas, wishes, fears, whatever it is. Can you be more elaborative on that as to where it has more emphasis, whether it's both in mental health or in the professional life or an integration of both? What would you classify?
I'd say in any communication with anybody, I think it's really interesting. You know, like I think language is so throwaway now. I mean, you know, it's just people as you say, think before they speak before they think, and often cause harm, often unintentionally, or as you were saying that, I was just thinking, even for ourselves, so we can harm other people by saying things without thinking about it. It just stuff just comes out of our mouth sometimes, and we're running around doing our busy lives and chatter, and we say things, and then we might not realize it at the time. Maybe we'll realize it later. Maybe we can apologize. Maybe it's too late. But also for ourselves, again, I was thinking about, as you were saying, that something for me tomorrow of I'm going to be seeing an old friend, and there's something I really want to be able to say, but actually if I communicate that, it's not a horrible thing or anything like that, but it's like, what's that going to do? How's that going to help me? So in that instance, I have time to think about it, and sometimes we don't. We get caught off guard. There's somebody in front of us, and suddenly we're saying things, or we're talking, and that conversation is flowing. We don't really have that time to think about it, and that's when hopefully some sort of mindfulness can come into it. Depends on the situation, but when we have time ahead to actually really think about, when we speak things to somebody, what we're going to say, the impact that might have, what's it going to get us, what is saying that. And one of the things we say in NLP is, what will having that, whatever that thing is, give me, or what will that do for me? So it could be, what was saying that sentence or that thing that I want to convey? If I say that, what will that do for me? What will that give me? How will that impact the other person? So it's kind of like, almost like going to, we can say the words, we have that conversation, it's almost like a 2D thing. But when we ask that question, and I'm thinking, as I'm saying it now, it's like, just having it would be like it takes it to that a deeper level, and another level of impact again, and I'm not necessarily talking on some huge scale, but just what will having that give me? Will it serve me? If I say that to that person because it's something I really want to communicate, will that serve me in a way, or will I walk away just regretting it, or now feeling uncomfortable? And is there another way I can walk away from that feeling strong, and just like, I've held this, I haven't needed to try and get something from somebody. So there's right. So many levels, but I think that can go really deep.
Interesting. So what has motivated you most of all to really focus on the power of language more than the average person? I mean, I know it's part of your practice, so there's one aspect to it, but what made you really focus on it? I mean, I know you were a firm believer in NLP, especially when you were going through your previous circumstances that obviously it enabled you to rise above from. But when you were realizing that there is such power in words and in how people use language, I got inspired because we've all seen with the pandemic how everyone had been put on Zoom. We were not in the same room anymore. There's something cut off. And so I realized that a lot of how we interact virtually, language takes priority. And then, of course, we see in the media and social media how language almost gets cut short or objectified, or a lot of symbolism rather than actual complete thought. That to me made me look at language and how powerful it is for establishing a decent quality of mental health. But what for you was why you really wanted people to learn how to harness the power of their language?
Sorry, I haven't thought about that before. What actually triggered? Because I am really passionate about that. It's one of the things I had a first call with a client before the show tonight, and it was like straight onto the language, and he was very much into that. Got very excited about it. But just thinking about what was the first time, and I can remember when I did this, the original, it's called the lightning process, that Dr. Phil Parker created, that got me out of the wheelchair. Essentially, this it's a 3-day course. It's quite intensive, and you have to work very hard at changing. Basically, it switches off the fight or flight response that your body can be under when you undergo huge stresses or life challenges. And I was very very ill when I was 17, and then essentially over those years I was in fight or flight. And when I did this course and I used this particular NLP technique, over a period of a few months, it switched off that fight or flight, and my body was able to heal because all those chemicals stopped being loaded onto my system. It's a very long story short. There's more information on my website if anyone's interested about that. But part of that was, I remember on that course we talked about changing words. words that were very significant, and a word that was very significant or huge to me was pain. Because I'd had 24 years of extreme chronic pain. I used to be on morphine at times and, you know, bent down with it, all that kind of stuff. And I remember when I came back from the course one day, and I was still quite ill at the time, but from being on the course, I was never in a wheelchair again, but I was still chronically ill. And I remember standing in the lounge where I was doing this technique on my, you know, practicing this thing that I'd been sent home to go off and do, which would rewire the structure of my neurological structure, my neural pathways. I remember thinking, I was saying the word pain. I was like, I don't want to say that word anymore, because every time I say that word, it's literally like a skyscraper above me. So I changed the word to stuff. And I just said, whenever there was something that I needed to say or speak in this technique about, I want, you know, this pain to stop, or whatever it would be, something like that, it would be stuff. And I would say the word stuff, and I would feel nothing. There would be no response, because that word meant nothing to me. And I just remember being like, it's really hard to describe, but it was like my body didn't respond to it. But when I would say pain, I'd use that word thousands of times over the years, not rightly or wrongly, just because that's what we do, to communicate to my mum, to my dad, to my brother, I'm in pain. So I very quickly realized the significance of this, told all my friends and family that I'm going to not use this word anymore. There was a few others as well that I cut out that were very, very strong words. And instead I'm going to use the word stuff. So if you hear me saying stuff's not very good today, you'll know what you need to know, because I might need to communicate it. So that was one of the first times. And then over the years, I mean, I can say the word pain now and it does nothing to me, because I'm 1,000,000,000% healthy and I have been for 5 years, you know, free of it. So I can embrace that word now and it's fine. But I think for me, yeah, it was then, it was just that how powerful that word can be. And we talk about how, you know, well, on the course that I've just been doing, Dr. Phil Parker talks about, you know, when you have a pain of some kind and you have to go to the hospital, I'm sure it's the same in the States, but you'll get a letter and it'll be from the pain clinic. And then you'll have your appointment in your calendar for the pain clinic. And then you'll go to that appointment and you'll walk through the doors and there'll be these words all over the place that just keep, like, you know, really compounding this very, very intense reaction to pain, and your body go, yes, pain, we're in pain. So yeah, that for me was when that started.
It's almost like words actually become trigger points, or
sure, yeah.
I mean, not just generated from the brain so you can use your vocal cords and communicate the words, but they actually have a chemical reaction depending on how you use it.
Absolutely.
and what tone you use it. I mean, a lot of people are just unaware of that. I mean, even I'm just being made aware of it now as we're speaking.
Well, we were talking just before the show, but one of the things that I think is a really helpful thing for people just to take away is just changing the certain words. And the two that I think are the two of the most powerful ones are changing the words control. So often we say, you know, we feel out of control, or I have no control over this, or I wish I had more control over this. It's quite a strong word when you think about it. Obviously, control is controlled. It's controlling. You're holding on to something. You're trying to manage it. So instead, in NLP, we use the word choice instead. So you're saying the same thing, but that I have choice. So it's just flipping it from one to the other. And when I say choice, it's almost like I can feel it down here. It just feels like a lovely thing. It's like I have all these choices. I have options. I have agency over my life to make all these decisions. And then, you know, if that one doesn't work out, I can make another decision, but I have choices. And the other one that is really, really powerful is when we say something's hard or difficult, challenging, is changing that to the word it's unfamiliar. And as soon as you start to say, oh, this is unfamiliar, you know, rather than this is really hard, it's like, oh, this is unfamiliar. Your brain just hears a whole different thing. It hears something that it can become familiar with.
Right.
I will often use, if I'm rock climbing, sometimes the routes that I'm on, it's like, this feels impossible. Like I'm literally like, I have zero idea how I'm going to get up this bit of rock because it is really hard. And I hear myself saying that and I'm like, I know that I will, because it always happens, and I'll work it and I get through it. It's like, this is unfamiliar. I just don't know this territory yet, but I will know this territory and it will become familiar. So it's
Interesting.
another
When
really,
you use the word impossible, you're setting your mind to think either positively or negatively, and you have to make the choice to
yeah.
choose to think positively, so you
Yeah.
regulate the word to keep the positive reaction.
Yeah. Oh, it just, as soon as you hear the word impossible, your brain's like, done, you know. Like it's kind of like your game over. But it's like, oh, this is unfamiliar. This is something, yeah, I could, okay, we're not denying that this isn't really hard or whatever that thing is. And I'm not suggesting, this is going to work for every single circumstance. There are some things out there that are just plain horrible or difficult or hard, bereavements, breakups, divorces. But I think, quite often in life there are things that we use those really strong words for. It's very dramatic, and it's just our language. I do it all the time. It's like, hang on a second, wait a minute. Is there another way we could say this that's a bit more appropriate? It's just unfamiliar.
Well, I want you actually, we're about to take our next break, but when we return, I would like to role play with you conversational approaches with given situations. Let's make this a little bit more of an interactive Zoom moment.
Okay,
But
see what
I'm
happens.
very intrigued in all of this because I catch myself in using the wrong words or the ones that make me feel more crippled, rather to feeling the agency like you described. So when we return, we're going to actually put words into action and show you all out there how Frank About Health is going to harness your power with language with Alison Petty right here on TalkRadio.NYC and on our YouTube channel. So please stay tuned. Welcome back. And before we cut off to the break, I was talking with Alison about we're going to spend the next segment putting the power of our language into practice, giving examples of words that we could learn to change over to have more of a positive mindset, listen more to our internal dialogue before we make the statements or comments we want to communicate. But I think, Alison, to set the stage here, I guess the one thing that I noticed that the communication styles need to be harnessed are in areas of professional, personal, as well as medical. I mean, being focused on healthcare, I'm always concerned, like when you receive a diagnosis or a treatment plan, how that's communicated to you and how you as the patient interpret it versus the advocate who's able to translate it. Because, in a patient's circumstance, there's always the embedded fear and discomfort of the possible worst case scenario. When that in itself can make a simple sentence sound like a harsh statement, you need a middle person to help make the translation. So that would be one thing that I think I'll save for last. But let's role play a personal situation and a professional situation and see how together we can learn how to communicate that situation more effectively. You want to try?
Okay. I'm not sure what we're going to do here, but you go for it, and I'll go with
Okay, this
you.
is almost like improvisation. So everybody out there, if you have any comments, so you're on our YouTube channel, there's the chat box right there. Just go ahead and make them. Give us some feedback on how we're doing. But Alison, let's say, for example, I come home from work after a bad day, and all I say is, I really hate my boss because he tells me what to do when I'm right out the door and wants me to stay late, and I'm thinking I'm going to quit.
Mhm.
Let's say that's the situation.
Mhm.
Of course, I end up going home with my head thinking, oh, how am I going to quit? I can't afford to pay the bills otherwise, because I've already set that stage. I've already
Yeah.
said that, but given the same situation, what would be a better way I could learn to comment on what frustrates me, but at least have a positive spin on it? Let's work on that
Yeah,
together.
sure. Okay, so the first thing I would say as well is that it is okay, and obviously you know this, Frank, but just to say that we're not saying it's not okay to feel a bit sorry for ourselves sometimes, because the client I was talking with earlier was like, yeah, to have a little bit of a wallow or a sulk for a few minutes or however long, it's good. It's just not staying in that place. It's about then getting out of it. So another one of the things I'm really passionate about is the questions that we ask ourselves. And you were just sort of, I can't remember what the question was that you said in your little bit of spiel there. But again,
Alison, I hate my boss because he makes me stay late when I'm ready to walk out the door after a hard day to do his leftover paperwork.
Okay, there was a question in there though as well. But
should I quit?
yeah,
I
should
think
I
I
quit?
right.
Yeah, or you might find yourself, if I can just add to your little role play there, you might find yourself asking like, why do I have such a rubbish job? Like, why don't I have a better job? Like, what is wrong with me? Why am I not worth, you might start asking all those kind of questions. If you're in that kind of place, you're feeling really bad about your boss and your job, you're likely to be going, surely there's more to life, like likely to be something about lack of worth. So again, as I was saying earlier, with that roadmap with the brain, your brain is just going to hear these questions, and it's just going to, if you think of your brain like a computer, it's just going to hear these questions that you're saying, unintentionally. You're not trying to bring yourself down. You're just saying these things. It's what we do. We're human. But your brain's going to hear the questions, and it's going to go off and it's going to find the answers to those exact questions. Again, your brain isn't going to come back to you and go, hang on a second, Frank, are you sure you want to say those things? Because I'm going to bring you back some really bad feelings and you might not want to feel like that. But how about if you do this instead, or say this? Your brain's just going to go, oh, right, well, perhaps I'll give you an example. Well, okay, your example of what would it be with your job? It'd be like, why am I so bad at my job? So maybe it's that. Why am I so bad at my job? Your brain will come back and say, because you're worthless, because you haven't got the skills, because you never, you didn't go to college, you didn't study, you opted out, you didn't do what you needed to do. It's just going to give those exact answers. Whereas instead, if you were to spin that and say, what could I do to maybe find a job that I really excel in? Or what could I do to get better at my job so that I have a happy work-life balance?
Right.
Your brain again is going to go off and find the answer to that question. It's going to go, well, I could go back to school. I could learn some new qualifications. I could start looking for a new job. I could write my CV, or I rewrite my CV. I could update my CV. I could start a LinkedIn profile. I could start networking, communicating, and it would just come back and be like all these things, because those are the answers to that kind of question. When you start ask those questions, guarantee your shoulders are going to start going back. You're going to start to feel more positive. You're going to start to see light at the end of the tunnel. Might be a long way off. I'm not suggesting it's like, bam, that's all your answers, but it's going to set your brain in a direction with that roadmap towards a much healthier structure. And we talked about how that language becomes that structure that our thinking sits upon.
Interesting. So based on what you just said right now, and looking back to the scenario that I created a scenario where I was already going in with a defeated mindset that this is the only job that I can have. So therefore, I'm just going to be totally frustrated at the way my boss is, when instead of figuring out there's a better way to communicate to him, maybe I chose already down the road not to communicate at all and just do the job and then leave as best as I can. So I'm always just complaining to you, let's say, in this example, and I'm still taking the active stance of not taking the positive actions which I should initiate, which will then change the dialogue unto itself, in addition to my feeling about the issue.
Yeah, it becomes like a chain reaction, and other things will just start to unfold, just by, you and I once talked about how when we, I can't remember the scenario that it was, but I was talking to you about how when we're talking to somebody and there's these like opposing forces, and you're kind of like, but if you change one, then the other one will naturally change. And then you went away and you experience that in your life. But it's, it's kind of like that. It's like you change something else will change. So you have that like knock-on effect. But if you start out, and again, we all have those really bad days, and you come away and it's really hard to like, or unfamiliar to pull yourself out of that. But by starting to change those words that we're using, or the way we're forming our sentences, it could be really subtle. But I remember I had a client once who, one of the questions I asked at the beginning of a session with a client was somewhere near the beginning, after finding out what's going on with them and what they're struggling with, is what do you want to have instead of what you currently got? And this is where you start to change where they've been to where they want to go. And the really important part of this, the answer to that question, is that they use active language to respond. So I often have to explain what that is and help them with that. But this client, I think she had really low confidence. And I can't remember the phrase, the exact word she used, but it was something along the lines of, I don't want to feel like rubbish when I wake up in the morning. I don't want to I don't want to feel anxious. That's right. I don't want to feel anxious when I'm in a room full of people. It was things like that. So she was answering the question. She just doesn't
Right.
want to feel those things. But that's not giving the answer we need. So I said to her, okay, well, how about you say it differently? And I explained about active language or positive language. And instead, she said exactly the same thing, but instead she says, I want to feel really good when I wake up in the morning. I want to feel really confident when I'm in a room full of people. So again, you're getting the same, you're coming to the same end result, but in a completely different way. And as she was saying it, she started to smile. She was like, oh, hang on a second, I'm saying the same thing, but I'm not. I'm saying it a whole different way. So again, with your example of your boss there, you know, again, it's okay to be there for a moment, but if you stay there, that's never going to change. Your brain is always going to go in that direction. You're always going to hate that job. But when you start to think, okay, well, what can I do to change this? Like, what other options do I have? What choices do I have?
Right.
Yeah. So sorry.
No. This is amazing, because even in way you described that example, I can see myself, if I take those techniques into account, I could come home again from a frustrating day and say, Alison, I really don't like my job, but I like the fact that I'm going to spend the weekend doing 10 resumes and see how that gets me into a new direction.
Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna sit down. I'm gonna. My mum calls them these um, spidergrams. I was just thinking my mum's probably listening to this show, so let's mention my mum, because she's like all my life to sort of help me with this stuff way before I discovered NLP. But these spidergrams, yeah, like something where I'm gonna like all these different options that I have, and or I'm gonna just sit down and think about actually what direction do I want my life to go in, you know, or it could be anything, but you know, it's not negating the fact that you're not happy with the position that you're in, but it's like, how long do you want to sit? We know this, you know, quite
Right.
often in life when we're struggling with something, we go over and over and over and over, and I do it myself over and over and over again. It's like, okay, we know this is a problem, and the more we spend time trying to um figure out what that problem is or find some answer in that problem, we just keep compounding the fact that there is a problem. Like, by looking at the problem, we're creating the problem. And I often think and say to clients, to myself, you know, 90% of what I think I have as problems are here. They're not actually out there. There are occasionally actual problems, like, you know, again, a bereavement or something really bad, but 90% aren't problems. So by keep looking at these problems, it just makes these problems bigger and bigger and more consolidated. Whereas, like, oh, okay, hang on a second, you know,
So there's a combination of the passivity, the passive language, the feeling that you're helpless, the inability to take initiative at different choices, thinking
yeah,
you're fixed in what you have,
yeah,
all of which could have been learned in your upbringing or previous circumstances or whatever. So in
yeah,
order to change the language, there also has to be a change in mindset. And I guess what your coaching does is find those skills to do that first before you start changing the dialogue more effectively for positive change.
yeah. And it does take work. It's not, you know, it's not something I would expect anyone to, you know, just get like that, or people understand it. But you know, we've spent a lifetime talking in a certain way. So to change it and to have that awareness takes effort. And you know, you often find yourself, you know, I'll find myself like, oh god, like that's just terrible language, but then it's like, okay, cool, right, it's bad language, let's change it, and like we know what to do. It's just
Right.
just yeah.
Well, we're about to take our final break, and when we return, let's talk about the medical diagnosis situation that I was talking about. In addition, let's learn about how people can get a hold of you and talk about more of other aspects in the workplace, and just wrap up for the evening. But thanks again, everybody, for listening for the last 45 minutes on the ways that we can harness the power of our language right here on Frank About Health, both on TalkRadio.NYC and on our YouTube channel. We will be back in a few. Welcome back to the final section of this episode of Frank About Health. We already spent the last section talking about a scenario where I'm coming home from work frustrated with my boss, and we were having a discussion about how to use active internal listening, be more assertive with your options going forward, not feel as restrictive as we are probably learn to be in negative situations. There has to be the reminder you tell yourself that you have an active choice no matter what the circumstance is. You just have to harness it And then you, of course, change your dialogue to fit the circumstance as well as to create change. I think also one of the things I wanted to focus on, Alison, was, you and I were speaking pretty much a couple days before I was receiving possibly either bad news or great news about my father's current health circumstances. And we were talking a little bit about how to best communicate with a professional in the medical industry, a doctor, an oncologist, and I've done a lot of research in the type of cancer my father's been dealing with. So I've been able to ask the right questions as well as understand the right treatments that can be options or alternatives. And it allowed me to actually find out that my father's situation was not as bleak as I was emotionally making it. And even though my father, of course, the patient, is already, when you have a disease, no matter if what you're hearing is positive or negative, you're still not going to feel your best. But at least by having a support system, which myself, my mother, the doctor, his palliative care doctor, among some other personal friends, it was able to get my father lifted. So I realized right there and then the power of language, especially when it comes to your mental health and in healthcare, period. So do you have any suggestions? We're not going to role play anything because we're also going to be, signing off shortly. But do you have any suggestions for anyone with any kind of medical condition, like especially the type that you had suffered for such a long time? What is the best way that a patient can learn to communicate to their doctor in a positive way, even when they're going through their fears and their concerns, but to enable a sense of relief rather than a feeling of despair? Do you have any ideas or suggestions or ways that you can recommend?
I think it just reminds me of a friend, very dear friend of mine, who did pass away a few years or some years ago with cancer. And one of the things for her was the getting results, and being able to communicate to her doctor the way in which she want to receive the results. And I think it's really difficult. And I think with something like that, because obviously it depends on the other person that you're speaking to, and often with very complicated health issues, it won't just be one doctor. There'll be lots of specialists and nurses. So you're dealing with a lot of different humans, and you might not get what you need from each one, and you might get what you need from others.
Right.
But and as you said, when you're going through something like that, you're not in your best place. So it's very difficult it can be very difficult to communicate. But I think if you are able to say to whoever is the person, that's going to be giving you the results, what's right for you as to how you want to receive them, there really is no way of knowing how that's going to land, obviously in the way we're talking now. But I just think just speaking about what's right for you is the most important thing.
And also to make sure your inner dialogue is in check. Yeah, it's more of talking yourself up to look at the positive in everything, no matter what you hear, right?
And again, things like the words that we're using, we do have these very strong words. I had a friend once that she used to say that she was going to take her drugs. It was medication. And I know in the States that you guys say drugs for medication. But she would say that here, and it's a very, very strong word, because we would just say medication. And it was just so heavy and it was so weighted. So again, changing things like that, the way I changed the word pain to stuff. I wasn't it's not like I'm denying the thing. It's just like that word is just so powerful, and it has a physiological response in my body. Like I would feel crushed by that word. It was, let's say, like a skyscraper. So thinking about the words that in your world of whatever's going on for you with any kind of ill health or any mental health struggle, what are the words that really make you kind of something, those really powerful words, and just change them. Change banana, whatever, something that means nothing to you, and you're still then able to have that communication. Obviously you've got to tell the people around you that my banana's not feeling too good today, or my stuff or whatever that is, so that they understand. They don't think you're going like, oh, well, is this person crazy? But it takes the power out of it. I think that's what it does for me. It takes the power out of that. That word has a lot of, or words have so much power, and it just deflates.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't mind sharing the nature of the words that were said, because they were non-threatening from the perspective of the remedy for what was a concerning problem in my father's case. but it was an add-on medication that was not chemotherapy. That was a positive. It was a hormone blocker, which just means that it supplements what's already going, leading to a positive result or a positive outcome. And so what I had to do in my father's case was, instead of say that, yes, you're about to take something that could have its side effects, I was saying, I'm going to come up with solutions for those side effects. And you're going to see a month from now better numbers than you have been seeing. And just putting those words in front of him, which are facts, I wasn't making things up, that made him have a positive outcome in terms of the discussion with the doctor.
That's beautiful. I love that. I'm going to find solutions for this, because that's so active. You know, I mean, that's as active as it gets, isn't it? It's not just like, oh, we will find solutions for this. Even that, the difference between, don't worry, we will find solutions for this. When you say that, it's like the thing hasn't happened. We've got to go and find those solutions. They're out there somewhere in the world. We will eventually someday. But instead you said, I'm going to find, or you could even say, you know, with affirmations, when I do affirmation work, rather than saying I want to feel light, or I want to feel energized, something like that. To me, when I say I want to feel, it's like I don't actually feel it, but I want to feel it. One day I might feel it. So I say, any affirmation work, that want is out the window. It's like I feel, or I am feeling, because it's immediate. It's here already. It's already done. It's in me. I am that thing. I'm feeling it. And I love the way you said that, you know.
And I'm just very grateful that I've had my whole history in dealing with multiple doctors for many different health reasons, especially epilepsy. And as a result, when I have conversations with my doctors, I'm speaking to colleagues. I don't feel like I'm a vulnerable patient. And I think maybe that has been my gift given to me through my experience in dealing with illness, that I can therefore transfer the conversation onto family and friends when they need direction that's more not humane, what's the right word, that's more on their level, rather than, oh, it's so up there in blue sky that I really can't interpret what's going on. You know, so and even Frank About Health, being here for over a year now and talking about the various topics of mental and physical health, running the gamut from COVID all the way down to diabetes and cancer and stuff like that. I have found myself, even in the way I deal with people that I know in personal and other social circles, that I'm always talking in a constructive way. I think this has been therapy unto itself, doing this show. But now, you probably have seen, we have 3 minutes until break. So I want you to tell how everyone can contact you, how they can reach you, how they can coach with you, all the things you want to share, what you do in your practice, especially how you can help people harness the power of their language.
My favorite thing. Well, I guess my website is just alisonpetty.com. That's Alison with one L, Petty with two T's. And everything's on there. So I have a blog on there, links to all my social media. And I always offer a free discovery call. So if anyone is interested in having a conversation, quite often people want to have a conversation with me because they've heard about my story of wheelchair to rock climbing to coaching.
Right.
And whether it's because they've got a similar chronic health struggle to what I had, or something similar. So I always offer a free call. There's no obligation for coaching, because sometimes people just want to have that conversation, and that can be enough just to give them some inspiration. So do reach out if you just want to have a chat with me about that, because that in itself can just be enough for some people. But also, obviously, I coach. So if anybody is interested in being coached as well, same again, the free discovery call. So just get in touch. You can do that through my website again as well, or social media. So yeah,
and any new podcasts or discussions upcoming?
I have a YouTube channel, so so I'm starting to do something called a conversation on, where I talk to people that have got like quite compelling stories, or we resonate in some way about something. I did one recently. My father unexpectedly passed away in lockdown, so massive bereavement in my life, and around that time I met another coach who'd gone through something similar. So we were having a conversation about grief and how you overcome that kind of thing, and then so well, let's film this. And so I'm doing things like that as well. So but yes, I do have a YouTube channel.
Awesome. Well, I'm sorry Phyllis couldn't be here today. She's actually she's traveling in Canada right now, taking care of some business. But the thing is that I wanted to welcome you back on. I know that you and I had talking about the workplace culture and dynamics, but this topic is much more profound, especially at this time in the United States. We have our upcoming election on Tuesday. November is Thanksgiving month. There's a lot of change happening in 2023. So I thought it was perfect to start November the correct way by just reminding everybody that it is not only the power of your vote, everybody, hint, 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 for November 8th, but it is the power of your language, the power of your mind, the power of reflection, the power of your experience, and just the power of connecting with all of us to be here tonight on Frank About Health, as well as with each other during holiday season. And of course, Alison, you and I will be in contact, I think even literally when the show ends. So that all being said, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for tomorrow's slate of shows on TalkRadio.NYC, which is Philanthropy in Focus with Tommy D, and then closing with Stephen Fry, always Friday. I'll be back next week with another episode of Frank About Health. And then, of course, you can look for us on the YouTube channel, as well as on www.frankrharrison.com, or as Alison said on her website, www.alisonpetty.com. And we're signing off now. So thanks for being here, and we will see you next week. Take care. Thanks again, Alison.
So good as always.
Same here.